What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch making some money investing in fractional real estate online, as usual. Today I want to talk about a little bit different of a topic. It is unknown unknowns, and it's basically this is my biggest fear in investing in new markets. So if you watch my recent video on the Reynolds, the mogul property that was listed in Cape Coral, Florida. There was somebody posted a comment underneath saying, "Hey, you missed that the UEP assessment has been paid on the Reynolds, but not on one of the other ones, I think." And also just mentioned some, that certain parts are more desirable than others because it has access to freshwater canals versus actual saltwater access. Well, and it just really reminded me. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I didn't have the whole things. Really just reminded me that, this is the reason that I'm trying to, build a community of us and for fractional real estate investors, is because whenever you're investing in a new area, the things that can get you are the unknown unknowns, the things that you don't even know to ask about. What this assessment is, it has to do with the utility expansion project. So this was an area that didn't used to have utilities. They did this project. There was an assessment. Apparently, you could either have paid for it in a lump sum or you're paying for it over time. And so the difference of it is, if you buy one that was paid for a lump sum, you have to, you don't have to continue to pay it. I could be misunderstanding that, but that's what I got from the internet. And this is what I'm talking about a lot when I'm saying, you want to do your own due diligence on these things. I'm just letting you know the things that I'm looking at for me. I'm certainly not an expert in every single market. And so there's going to be stuff that I miss. And so hopefully other people jump in with this type of info. But today I wanted to just share a list of a lot of the unknown unknowns that I've seen people get caught by over time. So the first one is, and this is going to blow your mind if you're in a market that doesn't have this, but there are certain markets that have rental permits. So you can't just rent your house out to anybody that you want to without getting a permit from either the city or the county or the state, depending where you are. Having started off my career in real estate in Texas, where there's no such thing as that, at least most of the places where I there could be some cities or counties where there's exceptions, and I don't know, but it wasn't anything that we had to do. Moved up to New Jersey and bought my first, not my first New Jersey investment property. I already owned some in Texas. And I just thought, okay, I'm just going to put it up for rent. I had no idea that I had to go, and every time you rent a property, it depends on the municipalities actually handle this, but I had a rental property in Palmyra, New Jersey, which is why I knew to pull this one up. And, I had to actually get a permit. Every time I put a new tenant in there, I had to do a new code inspection. They really checked everything just like, just a regular certificate of occupancy. Some of the cities did true full code inspections. Some of them just checked fire extinguishers and a couple of things, so they didn't all have the same thing. And so you could go, if you could invest in a couple of different cities that were nearby each other and have to understand different things, the different counties had different sales contracts, so this was something I didn't have any idea about. Something I see people get caught off guard with all the time here in San Antonio is they invest here for short-term rentals, and they don't understand how the short-term rental permit system works here. And you can figure it out online if you know what to look for, if you know to look for it and know to call. But people will call us all the time and say, "Hey, I bought this property. After I bought it, I found out, and it was advertised as this is a great short-term rental, but after I bought it, I found out it's right next to another short-term rental." And that's why we have this one-stop map where we can look at this is the San Antonio one-stop map, and I can look at where every short-term rental permit is. And we have a rule here that you can't have, that limits the density of short-term rentals in any given area. And so, my team, if they're helping somebody look for a property as a short-term rental, the first thing we do is check the one-stop map and make sure, hey, is there already a permit, too close by, and so we can't, have another one. But lots and lots of people don't know to check that. They have an agent who also doesn't know to check it because they don't sell to a lot of investors. And then they buy a property and they go to, file their application because they've heard it's really easy to get a permit in San Antonio, which it is. It's very easy to get a short-term rental permit as long as you don't, as long as you're not violating the density requirement. But so we see that all the time. So that's one, now every time I'm in a new market, I'm always looking at, is this a place that needs a rental license? Does it need a short-term rental license? Now, for a lot of the platforms, I'm not really digging into that if it's gotten to the point where I trust the platform. And so this is one of the instances where there's a big difference between investing on Mogul and investing on Lofty. So one has, if you have a team that is, it's the same team, they're the acquisition team buying properties in all these different markets, I would expect them to, and they're going to miss stuff because they are looking at a lot of markets and they can't be an expert on every one, but they're going to have a certain, level of understanding and professionalism when they're looking at deals and, at least know some of the basic questions to ask. Whereas if you have ones on Lofty, depending on who the co-owner or manager is who's bringing it to the platform and representing it, they might not be familiar with the market. They might not be familiar with the rules there. And so that's why that's one of the reasons that the marketplace strategy scares me a little bit, right? Because I want to really be able to lean on the knowledge and experience of the acquisition team, right? Not and so who that is, when you're looking at certain platforms, you have to ask, okay, who's actually on that team? Who's involved in checking these sorts of things? And if it's, if it's on, it's one of the reasons that I think the sites like Tyrios, even though, I'm not impressed at all with their stated returns, right? Like they're very low yields. But I love that they picked one market and they're going to, presumably become true experts in that market if they're not already, understand all of the little, idiosyncrasies of that market, be able to not get caught by some of these things. But so some other things, right, that I wanted to mention. Like utility access in some markets. So, and I'm not sure, I don't think this is going to block the access, but so I've been in some markets where people have bought properties for short-term rentals and found out, well, they don't actually, they don't have sufficient sewer or water capacity to run short-term rentals. Oh, before I forget, please like and subscribe. In the description of this video, I have links to all the places where I'm currently investing in fractional real estate online. Feel free to use those links, but understand that you have to do your own due diligence on the platforms and the properties and their terms of service if they're offering some free money with the links. You want to make sure that you understand what's required. Just because I'm investing on some of those or all those sites doesn't mean that you should. Just because I buy a certain property doesn't mean it's a good deal. So just do your own due diligence. Okay, yeah. So just jumping back into this, there's a market near me where, people buy properties, these big, nice properties for short-term rental, and they find out, oh, there's not sufficient sewer or water capacity to run the property, with the number of guests that they'd want to have there. That's something. There's some markets I've been in. If the last owner didn't pay the water bill, and I actually think we saw this on our Lofty property, then the next owner is responsible for bringing it current before they'll turn the water on for you, which is crazy, right? I mean, and that's why in those markets, title companies are usually getting final water bills, but a lot of the platforms are, especially if they're doing off-market deals or like Lofty's deals, they're not closing with title companies. And so it's one of the reasons that got missed on one of the properties. Uh, but yeah, where and how much your utility access is. Sometimes you might be, if you're in a certain community, you might have only one option as far as like who handles your trash, right? You might all have to hire the same trash people, or you might have limited access to who's going to provide your internet services, right? Which is again a problem for short-term rentals or pad splits. Any other ones that you're covering those, especially if there's people that will come here and they have like large accounts because they have a lot of properties with certain providers, and then they find out they can't have that, whichever provider that is. One of the big ones that was an interesting surprise to me when I first moved to Texas, or that I didn't really understand, is soil types and foundations vary a lot from one market to the next, right? Like here we have expansive soil, which means that the way that you handle your water runoff is really important, because when the soil gets wet, it expands. When it dries out, it contracts. There's a little visual here, but because we have long periods of drought, the soil contracts a whole bunch, and then when it rains, if the water isn't handled properly, it just if it's not brought away from the foundation, it causes damage. The other, there's another way that people fix this is by having these, foundation soakers, which basically just keep the water at a certain, or the foundation a certain level of wet, or the same, the ground around it. I had never heard about this, in some markets where I've been in others, it's everywhere. And so understanding the different, and the other thing too, almost every foundation in Texas is either pier and beam or it's a slab. Where I grew up in the Northeast, everybody has a basement, and then, or at least a crawl space, and understanding the differences between those and, the level of expenses. So for example, if you have foundation problems and you have a slab foundation, it can be extremely expensive to fix it. And in the process of fixing it, you very often can cause damage to your plumbing. If you have a pier and beam foundation, a lot of times it's a fraction of the cost to fix your foundation, and you're much less likely to have issues with your plumbing. So there's all these trade-offs and differences, and if you don't know to even ask when you're looking in a new market, hey, what about what's going on here? I mean, that's why, like, I'm always checking the things that I know of nationally, right? Like flood zones, you can look at those everywhere, crime maps, although sometimes even those you can tell that there's some reporting problems in certain markets. But yeah, foundations are a big one. Unique construction methods, right? Like there's certain parts of the country where you see like adobe or these cob houses, or I was just talking to somebody the other day who was looking at a property that was some strange, not the asbestos tile siding, but actually built with like a structural asbestos brick, which that I had never heard of. But in certain, a lot of times when you have like these new construction technologies, they became popular in certain areas first, and if they never spread out, you can end up running into stuff that's just completely weird to an outsider. Yeah, we have these geodesic domes here. There's some of these here in Texas, but I looked up cob houses because I know somebody building one here. If you went and bought that, you just have no idea, or you might not have any idea, like, okay, what do I need to be concerned with? I know even just like stucco throws people off, right? If you're starting in a market that doesn't really have stucco, you don't really know how to maintain it, how expensive certain things can be. It can be. So that's another one of the. One of the things. The differences in heating and cooling in different parts of the world, right? Like, I mean, using a furnace versus using a heat pump. What climate can you be in, and a heat pump is still acceptable to keep you warm, Or, for example, like where I grew up in Maine, nobody had natural gas. You didn't, like here in Texas, you have natural gas pumped into your home, right? You can use it to, almost everybody has it, if you're in the city limits at least. It's very cost effective way to heat and cool your home, at least here. And it was like that in where I lived in New Jersey, in a lot of different markets. Growing up in Maine, it's where it's very cold. Most of the places where I lived, they're pretty rural, and they didn't have the way that people heated their homes were either with wood stoves or pellet stoves. Pellet stoves really have been more recent, but you actually would have a giant oil tank on your property, and you would buy heating oil, and the truck would come and fill it up. And so, if you came from Texas and moved up there, you might not have any idea about how this is going to affect your investment. I mean, I still have extended family members that live up there, and they'll have some months where their heating bill is $600 for the month. If you're running a short-term rental up there, that's going to make a big difference, right? So that's just another example. Taxing districts, can be very confusing going from one market to the next. Like sometimes people are like, well, what's the property tax rate in Texas? And when I tell them I can't tell them if they don't give me an address, that sounds strange to some people. They think that the property tax rate should just be the same thing or in the county. But like I just pulled up a random property just to show you the way our tax rate, it's broken up into all these different taxing authorities, and each of them, like the school district, the city, the county, these are just, there's all these, this San Antonio River Authority, there's all these just special ones. And you could have two properties here in Texas that, I could stand in one property and see the other one, and they could have wildly different tax rates because one has a different school district, different, one's in city limits, one's not, even though they both have a San Antonio address. But without knowing this, so I've seen people just use the same tax rate for every property that they're looking at here in town. And it's, you could have anywhere from, I've seen as low as 2.2 or even a little lower to up to 2.8%, right? And that's a huge difference in the actual tax bill. If you don't, but it makes perfect sense to me if you come from a place where the property tax rate is what it is in a county or in an area, and then you move somewhere where it's like wildly different. You might not know to look at it in each one. One of the things we ran into this is like how you calculate livable square footage, or if what counts as a bedroom. I've been in some markets where in order to list a property on the MLS or list a room as a bedroom, it has to have an egress window and a closet. In some markets, you don't need a closet. You just need an egress window. I don't know of any that don't need a second form of egress. There are some places where you can have two doors, right? And, that both exit into the home, but those still count. But yeah, the requirement for a closet, it doesn't exist in a lot of markets, but it does in some. The same thing with, we saw a home on Lofty, and I think it was Memphis, but I'm not sure. It's where they have they count rooms as bedrooms that you have to walk through to get to other bedrooms. That was mind blowing to me. We saw in some of the properties in Atlanta where the square footage below grade wasn't included in the square footage when you sold the property, or wasn't included in the public records as total square footage, but they still counted it. I don't know. They counted it differently. It didn't show up as square footage of the home, even if it was a fully finished basement. But you could still look on the records and see, oh, they have a finished basement. That was something that was new to me when I was looking there. So if you watched any of those older videos, I brought that question up because I at least knew to ask when I saw these differences. Zoning, again, is just, can be different everywhere. So one of the things we have here in San Antonio is we have zones that are MF zones, which are multifamily. We have R zones, which are residential, and then we have RM zones, which are like duplex to fourplex. So they are still multifamily, but they're not the same as the MF. And the way the numbering systems work are different. So like MF 33 means you can have 33 units per acre, but R4, because it's just a R, not an RM, means it's a single family zone, and you have to have at least a 4,000 square foot lot. But then RM4, which you can have a duplex to fourplex, is the same thing. You can have up to a fourplex, but on a 4,000 square foot lot. And so that's much different than the base zoning codes in a lot of other places. A lot of places will have, like, R2 means you can have 2 residential units. If you don't know that zoning, the actual codes change from one place to another, I've seen people get messed up. There's a lot of people that will buy what they think is a legal duplex here in town, and I don't know how it gets through their agent, through title, through the appraisal, through the lender. But then, you end up checking and say, oh, no, that's a single family home. Maybe it has an accessory dwelling unit, but that can't be rented out as 2 separate units by an investor. But if you don't know to ask, that's again something I've seen people get caught with. And even our accessory dwelling unit rules here in San Antonio are different than a lot of other places. Like you can't, you have to live in one of the units to rent out the other one when you have ADUs here. When I tell people that they come from other markets where ADUs are really just counted as like another unit, it blows their mind. Like they don't even understand. You can't buy those as a pure investor here and have them work in the way that they do in other places. Building codes vary in every place, and so again, like if you don't know, if you just get used to one market, you might not know the questions. Historic districts are one that, like, I've seen people just run into all kinds of problems because you have, like, they don't necessarily work. There's different types of historic districts, and they have different levels of control depending on, what state, what country, what county, all these things. Though I've seen people buy properties thinking they were going to flip them and finding out that they can't change anything on the outside, and it's because it was something they didn't know to ask, right? And okay, so those are just all examples, but like, what can we do about it, right? Like, if those are unknown unknowns, it's like, how do you know what to ask? And I mean, the answer in my mind is exactly what I'm trying to do with just building a community of investors, right? And that's why in the description of this video, I have a link set up to the Discord channel where we've got a couple hundred investors, that are fractional real estate investors that going in there, sharing their due diligence, their thoughts on different properties, all the different platforms. You're welcome to join if you haven't already. There's no cost. It's not a sales funnel. If anybody DMs you after you join that looks like me, that's trying to sell you anything, whether it's advice, properties, investments, anything, that's not me. It's a scammer. Please report them. We've had several of them, and I just, I banned them from the server, but you might still get DMs from them otherwise. But anyway, feel free to join there. I think that's the number one thing that we can do. Like, if you are experienced and sometimes just living in a certain market, you'll know things about that market that even if you're not an experienced investor, you might be able to share with the rest of the people who don't know, that like don't even know to ask, like, okay, does this property have saltwater access, or does it have, what is it? Freshwater canals. Like, which is it? That's not a question that, being landlocked here in San Antonio, this never comes up, right? I know when we go up to Canyon Lake area, the lake access and views and all that stuff becomes very important. But I'm not ever in an area like this. So, sharing that kind of knowledge and experience with the rest of us when we're doing due diligence in a certain market would be great. But yeah, I think that's really all we can do, right? And it's one of the reasons why anytime I've invested in a place in real life, I've always moved there first, often rented for a while, or at a minimum made several trips there, networked, talked to a lot of agents, talked to a lot of other investors. And so it's part of the reason why fractional real estate is scary to me, right? Because I just did a video recently about how much diversification is important and how helpful it can be. But we're taking on a lot of risk of all the potential unknown unknowns, all the things we don't know to ask about when entering a new market. It's the big reason I've stayed away from international properties, because I think that it's, that issue is just magnified in those cases. But yeah, so that's, again, that's why I'm trying to create this community. I'm encouraging everybody to join. I'd like it if you shared whenever stuff like this comes up. When we're looking at a new market, if it's a market you're familiar with, if you've lived there, don't be shy. Jump in, share it in the comments of videos, share it in the Discord. Help everybody else out, and that's kind of the goal here, right? Because it's just. I'd hate to, and it's going to happen sometimes, and it's part of the reason I don't, I'm not going to put all my eggs in any one basket, but there's going to be times where, you are going to have this just completely, you'd be completely blindsided by, we invested in something and there was this rule in place that we didn't know about, or this construction type that, now it's going to cost us way more money when it comes to, there was one, and I can't think of what the walls were made of, but this one property, it had to be rewired, and it wasn't just drywall, and it wasn't even just like the lathe and plaster, but it was something that demoing the walls was so cost prohibitive, or opening them up to do new wiring, that they actually just ran wires and conduit on the surface of the walls. It looked terrible, but was really the only economically feasible thing to do. But you've run into all sorts of different things. That one, it's one of the reasons why I think every investing group should have its resident old guy that is just been through a lot, seen lots of stuff, has lots of stories, that is just there to, we used to have this one analyst when I worked at this commercial real estate firm, that it was just whenever something really weird came up, that we all just went to this old guy who had just really seen it all, right? And I think that we need to find one of those in each market that we invest in, right? It's not just, because you're never going to have one that's seen it all in every market. And it is, it's why it's good to keep, continually ask the questions hey, what else should I, and one of the things I tried using some search engines and being okay, what else should I know about in this area as an investor that's different in, some AI, and it sometimes will spit out interesting thoughts, but a lot of times, a lot of this stuff is it's not really necessarily on the internet. It's something that's collectively understood in certain markets that people know these things are important, and whatnot. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share, right? I wanted to just point out there are tons of these things that people get caught by on a regular basis in real estate investing, because they're in a market that they're not familiar with, and just really want to encourage everybody to jump in whenever we're looking at a new property type, a new market, a new anything. Really feel free to get in there and try to share your expertise, because I know now our group is getting to a point where there's a lot of people that have knowledge and experience that could be sharing it. If ever anybody wants to get on the channel and do a little interview, a little discussion about any topic that they think people would want to hear more about one of the properties, about one of the markets, any of that sort of thing, I'd love to do more of that on here, because it's really the whole reason I'm doing this, right? I want to see the fractional real estate grow. I think it's only going to happen if we all make money on these investments And that happens by not getting caught by people dumping bad properties onto this platform because, people from out of state aren't going to know this is a problem or that's a problem or something like that. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Until next time, I'm going to just keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.